Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, DwyerVIP.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. No sooner did I finish a post-fight video, on my thoughts on Daniel Geale versus Anthony Mundine. My thoughts that Daniel Geale's speed, jab, and combination punching and movement, pace, was just too much for Anthony Mundine, who is a defensive fighter akin to Adrian Broner and Floyd Mayweather. No sooner did I complete that video than I then started receiving comments on the video and emails from people saying, Dwyer, you need to be consistent. You need to realize that it's exactly for those reasons why Manny Pacquiao would beat Floyd Mayweather. I even got someone say it's exactly for those reasons why Saul Alvarez would beat Floyd Mayweather. Well, let me just say this. These comments show me one thing. Rightly or wrongly, Floyd Mayweather remains the biggest name in boxing. It's interesting to me that I mentioned Adrian Broner's name. Broner's a big up-and-coming star. And none of the comments mention Broner. No one cares about Broner. They care about Floyd Mayweather. Whether they're a Pacquiao fan or a Saul Alvarez fan, the focal point, the standard, the measuring stick is Floyd Mayweather, right? That's the first point. The second point is Manny Pacquiao still has a group of very loyal followers out there who don't believe that there is anyone else in the sport. And keep in mind, this is a sport with people like Saul Alvarez, Robert Guerrero, Amir Khan, countless others. You have a huge fight taking place. Kell Brook, unbeaten, versus Devin Alexander, who's only lost to Timothy Bradley. And of course, you still have unbeaten Timothy Bradley out there. And yet I still get more emails about a Manny Pacquiao-Floyd Mayweather matchup than any of the other guys. Even though some of these other guys have beaten Pacquiao in the case of Timothy Bradley, or have never been beaten and are on the verge of the biggest fights of their career in the case of Kell Brook. Right? Fair enough. Okay. Well, let me directly address the claim that because Daniel Geale beat Anthony Mundine, who fights kind of like Floyd Mayweather, that means that Manny Pacquiao would overwhelm Floyd Mayweather. I don't believe so. I believe Mayweather would win that fight rather handily. For one, Manny Pacquiao is coming off of a devastating knockout loss. Devastating. When you get knocked out like that, where you're on the canvas, unconscious, face first, for several seconds, in other words, it's not a TKO, it's a KO, and you're in your mid-30s, in other words, you're not 21 or 22, you're in your mid-30s. In my opinion, you need to take time off. You're not ready mentally, perhaps physically, to get in the ring with perhaps the sport's best pound-for-pound fighter. Right? The timing is totally off. That's the first thing. The second thing, let's just focus on style. I don't think the public fully understands how good Daniel Geale is. Well before this fight. In fact, before this fight was announced, the Geale-Mundine rematch, I had Daniel Geale on my list of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. Now, as good as Manny Pacquiao is, let's understand that Pacquiao is not as two-handed as Daniel Geale. Daniel Geale's not in there trying to set up a right hand. It's not right hand or nothing, right? His jab isn't a perfunctory jab to set up a right hand. And I say Geale's right hand because Geale's right-handed as opposed to Manny being left-handed, right? I'm talking about the dominant hand. Geale's not in there just trying to set up a right hand, right? Geale actually is two-handed. I would argue that Manny Pacquiao is predominantly a one-handed fighter. No, I'll agree. He hurt Ricky Hatton with the right hand. I'll agree he hurt Marquez with the right hand. But I believe he can only throw that right hand from certain angles. I don't believe Daniel Geale is that limited, right? I know a lot of people are upset to even hear the word limited in reference to Manny Pacquiao, but we need to understand that we're comparing two of the best boxers in the sport. For the record, I've had Manny Pacquiao on my pound-for-pound list for a very long time as well. Comparing pound-for-pounder to pound-for-pounder, I believe Daniel Geale is more two-handed than Manny Pacquiao. I believe Daniel Geale is much better defensively than Manny Pacquiao. All you have to do is compare and contrast Daniel Geale having his hands up against Anthony Mundine. Geale's hard to find, and even when you find him, he has a hand up, right? He's jabbing you, but he has a hand up. He's ducking. He's hard to find. Compare and contrast that with Manny Pacquiao getting dropped not once but twice by Juan Manuel Marquez, right? Look where Manny's hands are. When he gets knocked out, look where Manny's hands are, right? Manny's wide open. The difference between the two guys is Geale is more technique. Manny Pacquiao is more physicality, physical brilliance, athleticism, right? So Manny Pacquiao is beating you because he's fast, not because he has hands up, not because technically he's a very good defensive fighter. Let's also talk jab. Now understand, Daniel Geale, when he's throwing a jab, that jab has some stiffness, right? When he's coming in, throwing a jab, it's not just to distract you. That jab's actually hitting you upside the face. You gotta do something about that jab. You know, Daniel Geale really doesn't even have to throw too many other punches when he gets that jab going, right? Look at the Felix Sturm fight. Now keep in mind, Sturm himself has a stiff jab, right? Let's give Felix Sturm that. But understand, when Daniel Geale comes in and he's hitting you with 2-3 jabs, you know, it's almost like, not quite, because this guy to me has a legendary jab, perhaps the standard, but it's almost like getting hit by Larry Holmes. In other words, this jab is pulverizing you. Geale's jab to me is stiff. Manny Pacquiao's jab is more of a distraction to set up his left hand, right? I believe in boxing, guys can be brilliant off of athleticism. But once that athleticism starts to fade a bit, think Pacquiao, think Roy Jones. Once that athleticism starts to fade a bit, you start to notice that the technique isn't quite there. That the fighter who used to just dodge headshots is now getting caught and knocked out by headshots, right? In other words, he doesn't have a hand up. He can't rely on his technique. I believe Manny Pacquiao can't rely on his technique. like Daniel Geale can. Geale has fast hands. Geale is an excellent athlete. Geale has, quite frankly, some of the best stamina in the sport. You see Daniel Geale early in a fight. You see him in the 10th round. You know what? He's still going. Right? This is a guy who doesn't slow down that much. He has great stamina. He's excellent athletically. But he's also pretty good technically. Right? The point I was trying to make in the earlier video isn't that Daniel Geale's just coming in and throwing a lot of punches. Right? No, the point I was making is Daniel Geale has a technique. Just like another great athlete from an earlier generation, Ray Leonard had fast hands too and threw punches in combinations. But Ray Leonard had a technique. It was hard to hit Ray. In my opinion, it's hard to hit Daniel Geale. In fact, let me say this. While prime Pacquiao, and you know my theory, my theory is that Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather are a little bit past their primes now. Right? In my opinion, prime Pacquiao was hard to hit more because of his athleticism and his legs. He has great legs. More so than his technique. Right? I believe that Daniel Geale, quite frankly, has the technique to go along with the athleticism. Right? He's two-handed. He's decent defensively. He has a stiffer jab than Manny Pacquiao, right? He's less of an ambush fighter than Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao would come This is obviously choking me up. Manny Pacquiao would come in, throw fast hands, devastate you, then he'd jump back out. I believe Daniel Geale is more of a lateral reset the angle type. He comes in, he's hitting you with the jab. He then is throwing a combination up top and down low. And then, as you're trying to find him, he leans over to the side. That's why Mundine's trying to limit his leaning to the side, his movement to the side, by having a hand up, kind of like a guardrail, kind of like stop him and keep him right here and stuff like that. Manny Pacquiao, on the other hand, and you saw it when he got knocked down by Marquez, and in fairness to him, he did have a hand up. He just didn't have hair protected on that particular one. Manny Pacquiao comes in and does damage, and then sometimes just goes straight back. Right? And so I think we need to recognize that technique-wise, in my opinion, Daniel Geale presents more problems for the Adrian Broners, Floyd Mayweathers, and Anthony Mundines of the world than would a Manny Pacquiao, quite frankly. Right? I know that's hearsay in some corners, but we'll be politically incorrect here online. For me, it's just a matter of trying to be on the right side of the bet when the match is over. Let's talk about Canelo. You know, Canelo's interesting to me because Canelo falls a little bit on the other side of the fence. While Manny Pacquiao, athletically, is a great athlete. In other words, I've never had doubts, and I mean never had doubts, about Manny Pacquiao's hand speed. Even a critic like me who, as I sit here today, I still don't believe Manny Pacquiao won any of those one Manuel Marquez fights. Even a critic like me, who might be a little bit more critical, just might, of Manny Pacquiao than the general public. Even a critic like me has never questioned Manny Pacquiao's hand speed. It's off the page. It leaps out at you. His athleticism grabs you. Nor have I ever questioned Manny Pacquiao's foot speed. He moves around the ring faster than most guys. You know, he's always been fast. You know he has world-class hand speed. You know he has world-class foot speed. With Canelo, I have questions. His hand speed, which has improved, No question about it. But his hand speed doesn't look to me to be as fast as, let's say, Floyd Mayweather's hand speed. Right? Whereas Pacquiao's faster than Mayweather, Canelo is not. In fact, I'll go further. I believe Daniel Geale has faster hand speed than Saul Alvarez. Understand, when you're dealing with a pot-shotting counterpuncher, hand speed is crucial, because that counterpuncher is looking to throw punches through whatever hole they can find. Right? Part of the effectiveness of Daniel Geale or Ray Leonard, combination punchers, Meldrick Taylor, another combination puncher from back in the day, is that these guys had hand speed. So when they were throwing a combination, you really had to spend your time blocking the combination. If your hands aren't that fast, then a Mayweather or a Mundine, they'll just block the combination. Right? You're throwing the combination, you're like, okay, block, 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 counter. Right? It's because the Ray Leonards and Geales are throwing it quickly, Meldrick Taylor, that you can't block the punches. So to me, Canelo doesn't really have that blinding hand speed. Let me go further too. If you're a combination puncher and you're throwing a lot of punches, you need stamina. Right? As I said before, Daniel Geale is still bringing it late in fights. He's still outworking you late in fights. Right? You know, Ray Leonard went 12 rounds, in fact, 15 rounds in fights, right? These guys don't conk out. Let me just say, Saul Alvarez, I really wonder about his stamina. In fact, I don't want to get too hokey here, but because Saul Alvarez gained so much weight between fights, think about it. Saul Alvarez, between fights, has weighed as high as 168. Understand, that's a weight class above the Daniel Geale Anthony Mundine fight. Because Saul Alvarez weighs so much between fights, I just don't believe he's in the physical condition that a Daniel Geale is. I would worry more about Geale beating Mayweather if I were a Mayweather fan than I would Saul Alvarez beating Mayweather. Right? Because I believe Geale is just faster, throws more punches in bunches, has more stamina, has faster foot speed than Saul Alvarez. Right? I don't think Saul Alvarez has the hand speed to do what would need to be done to beat Mayweather. Right? Let me say this too. There's talk about Mayweather fighting Robert Guerrero. To me, that's a more mouth-watering fight. Now, I will say this. Neither Guerrero nor Mayweather really wants to deal with a lot of volume coming back. Right? Let's face it. Guerrero looked bad against Dowd Yordan. Guerrero lost to Orlando Salido. Right? We know Guerrero has some problems when the other guy brings high volume. But Floyd's not bringing high volume. And in my opinion, Guerrero moves a lot better than Canelo. Right? The question for me in that fight is which Robert Guerrero shows up. The tough guy who decides he's going to take Selçuk Aydin and Andre Berto's big punches and trade with them, or the younger Guerrero who I think would give Mayweather much more trouble. Right? The Guerrero who beat Michael Casitas, for example. Right? The Guerrero who beat Escovedo, for example. The Guerrero who could stay outside, move, stick a jab, and can throw a combination. Right? So, to the Canelo crowd, I'll just say this. I'm actually more interested in Guerrero Mayweather than Canelo Mayweather. Okay, and let me just say it's fascinating to me that guys like Robert Guerrero, for whatever reason, don't seem to get the fan reaction that Manny Pacquiao and Saul Alvarez get. That's a bit surprising to me. Anyway, let me hear from you. I think Mayweather beats Canelo. I think Mayweather beats Pacquiao. Mayweather Guerrero, that's an interesting fight. That's a close fight. That's an interesting fight. If Guerrero fights like he did against Berto, he loses. But if Guerrero comes out and fights more like he did against Jason Litzow and some others, that fight could be interesting. One of the things to notice, though, is that Guerrero hasn't fought like that since he had surgery. So you need to keep track of that. Let me hear from you. And as for Manny Pacquiao, let me just say, you remember how Roy Jones aged, right? Roy Jones was unstoppable. He even beats Antonio Tarver. People forget that first fight. Then he goes up to heavyweight. He wins the heavyweight championship. He's just too fast for John Ruiz. Great fight. Then he comes back down to light heavy. He gets knocked out by Antonio Tarver. Understand what happens after that knockout. And that knockout, is almost as dramatic as the Manny Pacquiao stoppage by Juan Manuel Marquez, right? Roy does try to get up. He is more conscious than Manny Pacquiao, but he's been KTFO'd. Understand what happens next. An argument can be made that Roy Jones is never Roy Jones again, right? He couldn't deal with Glenn Johnson. After that, Roy Jones gave some performances that didn't look that inspired. When he dealt with Joe Calzaghe, he didn't come close to winning that fight. He got taken apart in that fight. He had a moment in that fight where he knocked Calzaghe down early. But then when Calzaghe got up, Calzaghe had him pinned on the ropes for much of that fight. The problem with being a great athlete is that can trump everything when you're young. But as you get into your mid-30s, like Manny Pacquiao is right now, and that athleticism starts to fade because Father Time is the champ, right? When that athleticism starts to fade, you better have some Klitschko-type technique. You better have some Tarver-type technique, some Hopkins-type technique, if you're going to survive at a high level in the sport when your physical gifts start to diminish. Can people here honestly tell me that they feel that Manny Pacquiao is a technical master? Can people here really tell me that Manny Pacquiao's defense is as good as Daniel Geale's? Or that Manny Pacquiao's jab is as good as Daniel Geale's? I know Geale is lesser known, but here online we try to get to the heart of the matter. I think Geale is underrated. Let me hear from you. Thanks for stopping by.